Hi, everybody, and welcome back to video number 3 in chapter 21. Here, when we left off, we were going to look at how we compute overhead controllable and volume variances. So, we have these flexible budgets, and we have different capacity levels, 70%, 80%, 90%, 100%. And now we're going to prepare our flexible budget using our variable cost per unit and our fixed costs. This is a monthly budget for the month of May. So now, as you can see, we have differing overheads based on our monthly numbers. So let's take a look at that. I should come back to and mention that this is the factory overhead variable costs. Here we have our indirect labor, our indirect material, power and light, and maintenance. And that does vary with the amount of product that we make. So here we're focusing, of course, on overhead. These are very difficult numbers to get in the real world, I would tell you. In any event, how do we need to determine an allocation base, and then we compute our standard overhead rate and predict an activity level. And we compute the standard overhead rate based on that. So we're going to look at the budgeted overhead at the predicted activity level. And then we're going to divide that by the standard allocation base at the predicted activity level. Let's see how that works. Here, we're going to go back and say overhead variance then is the difference between the actual total overhead and the standard overhead applied, right? Applied. And how do we get that? We're going to look at how we do that here with applied. We're going to take our actual production and multiply it by our standard amount of the allocation base. And then we'll multiply that times the standard overhead rate. Okay, so let's see. Let's come back and I want you to see that we're looking at the 80% level, it looks like here, which results in 20,000 of total overhead. And there she is right here. And at that level, we're expecting 2,000 direct labor hours. So now that means that we're going to apply $10 of overhead per direct labor hour. Now our actual total overhead, which is given in the problem, 18,150. Our standard is going to be 17,500. And we're going to therefore calculate an overhead variance being 650 unfavorable. You'll remember that our standard labor hours for this level of volume was 1,750 hours. And that's where we get this $17,500 by multiplying that 1,750 hours times $10 per direct labor hour. And the result is our $650 unfavorable variance. Now, what we want to do is break that into two pieces here. Here we have our controllable variance and our volume variance and our total overhead variance. And our total overhead variance, which we just calculated, was $650 unfavorable. So if I look at Exhibit 21-16, I'm going to find that I have 18,150 actual overhead dollars used. And then my standard, which we just calculated, the 1,750 hours times $10 gave me that $17,500. And if I go back to the exhibit 21-12, I'll find that our budgeted overhead at the units we produced was 19,000. Let me go back and show you that. And coming back to exhibit 21-12, you can see here we have the 19,000 of total overhead predicted at that volume of 3,500 units. Okay. And now we're in position to spin out the two subcategories of variance, of overhead variance, controllable variance, and volume variance. And here we're going to do the same thing we've been doing. We look at the 18,150 to compare to the 19,000, and then the 19,000 compared to the 1,750. And we find that we have an $850 favorable variance and for controllable variance, and then $1,500 unfavorable volume variance. Okay, so the controllable variance, we can calculate that, which we just did, taking the 19,000 compared to the 18,150. That gives us that 850 favorable variance. And now this is where we get the 19,000 based on 3,500 actual. We expected to do 4,000, but our actual was 3,500. And that's where we get the 19,000. This gets very tricky, as you can see. Okay. All right. So our variance summary here. Good to have this well understood in your minds. Our product cost variance, we're going to have several pieces of that: direct material variance, direct labor variance, and then overhead variance. And we talked about price variance and quantity variance for direct materials. And we talked about rate variance, wage rate variance, as I often call it, and efficiency variance here for direct labor as well. And then overhead variance is comprised of both the controllable variance and the volume variance. So now we'll take a look at analyzing changes in sales from expected amounts. So a similar analysis can then be applied to these sales variances. We're going to use two additional G-Max products, Excel golf balls and Big Bert drivers, to illustrate. Here we're going to budget that we're going to make 1,000 golf balls and 150 Big Bert drivers. But what did we actually do? We sold more golf balls than we thought, and we sold them at a higher price than we thought. But from the Big Bert, we sold less and units than we thought, and we sold them at a lower price. If you can see that 190 below my picture there. Okay. All righty. So let's see how that spins out. Sales variance, that is. So here we have two products now. So we're going to look at them together. Here is our golf balls. 1,100, that's the actual. 1,050, that was the actual. 11,550. Our budget was 1,000 at $10 or 10,000. So again, we're going to bring actual sales over and budgeted price over per unit. Okay. And that is going to spin off the fact that we had 550. That's going to be a favorable sales price variance. And we also had a sales volume variance, right, of $1,000. Why? Because we sold more volume than we thought, and we sold it at a higher price than we thought. Now, the drivers were a little bit different. Here, our actual was less, both from volume and quantity, and our standard was better than that. So we had unfavorable variances both for the sales price variance and the sales volume variance. We add the two of these babies together and we get a total for both products. We're 850 unfavorable for sales price variance in total and $1,000 unfavorable for sales volume variance in total. All right, overhead spending and efficiency variances. Now we spin out some additional variances here, and so pay really close attention to what you're doing with this chart. This is a great little chart. Here was our total overhead variance, and you'll remember that we spun out our variable overhead variance and our fixed overhead variance previously. So now we're going to split out this variable overhead variance into spending and efficiency variances, and we're going to split out our fixed overhead variances into a spending variance and a volume variance. So spending and efficiency, spending and volume. And what we can control, the controllable variance that we calculated previously here, are these three pieces. So you want to have this really written down in your notes, because if you're like I am, this is very confusing to really keep this straight in your mind. Okay, everybody good with that? We'll move on. Now we'll take a look at computing these overhead and spending efficiency variances. This might be a good place to stop this video. And when we return, we'll take a look at finishing this off. Until then, bye for now.